Her hand shot out, clamping over his. The fork stopped an inch from his lips. The cartel leader glared, but the woman held his gaze, her knuckles white. Across the dining room, the waiter froze, tray in hand. He didn't see a romantic gesture. He saw the subtle nod she gave to the man in the corner, the faint dusting of white powder on the rim of the plate. And in that second, he understood. This was a murder everyone was supposed to watch. The man at the table was Rafael El Halcon Vargas, a name that controlled the cocaine flow through 3 countries. The woman was his new associate, a shadow in his organization. And the waiter was Miguel Santos, who came to work that night expecting to serve ceviche, not witness an assassination. This is how a $20 an hour employee became the only person who could unravel a conspiracy that reached from a Miami restaurant kitchen to the highest levels of a billion-dollar cartel. But first, he had to survive the next 10 minutes. Miguel Santos did not run. He walked to the service station, placed the tray down, and began polishing a wine glass, his hand steady while his mind raced. He had 30 seconds before the manager would ask why Table 9's appetizers were delayed. 30 seconds to decide if what he saw was real. The white powder wasn't salt. It was too fine, too deliberately placed on the gilt edge of the plate, right where the fork would scrape. And the woman, she hadn't looked afraid when she stopped Vargas. She had looked impatient. 3 months earlier, Miguel's world was only this restaurant. Oceano Azul, a monument of white linen and crystal on Miami's Brickell Avenue, where the specials cost more than his weekly rent. He was 28, a business student from Caracas on an expired tourist visa, working doubles to send money home and avoid notice. His philosophy was simple: see nothing, hear nothing, remember only the wine pairings. It had worked for 2 years. Rafael Vargas changed that. He first dined at Oceano Azul on a humid Thursday in July. No entourage, just 2 quiet men in suits at a corner table. Miguel's manager, Anton, pulled him aside. "That is El Halcon. You serve him. You look at the plate, not his eyes. You say sir, not senor. You forget his face when he leaves." Vargas ordered the sea bass, ate slowly, paid in cash, and left a tip that was a mistake: $500 bills under a coffee cup. Anton made Miguel return it. Vargas had smiled, a thin crack in a granite face. "Keep it for your discretion." It wasn't a request. Vargas was 56, a ghost with a public face. Official records said he was a shipping magnate from Colombia. DEA files later leaked, alleged he was the operational brain of the North Val Cartel's Gulf Coast network, moving over 2 tons of cocaine monthly through port containers marked frozen shrimp. His power wasn't in brutality, but in silence. Competitors didn't die loudly. They failed to appear. He built loyalty not through fear alone, but through layers of plausible deniability. The food at his meetings was always exquisite, and always tasted first by someone else. The woman arrived with Vargas 6 weeks after that first dinner. Her name was Sofia Rivas, introduced as a logistics consultant from Panama. She was in her 40s with a calm that felt like a held breath. Miguel noticed she never touched her wine. She watched Vargas's hands, his glass, the staff. At that second dinner, Vargas's usual food taster, a bulky man named Leo, was absent. Sofia had nodded to the kitchen door, and a new man, younger, nervous, had come out to sample the steak. Leo was never seen again. The cartel was fracturing. That was the whisper in the kitchen, passed between the dishwasher and the sous chef who had a cousin in the business. Vargas's old guard, men who'd built the empire with blood in the 90s, were resisting his push to legitimize, to invest in resorts and banks. They saw it as weakness. A power struggle was brewing, and Sofia Rivas was Vargas's answer. An outsider with no loyalties, brought in to streamline, to cut out the rot. She was his new blade. Miguel saw their next meeting. It was a Tuesday, slow. Vargas and Sofia at their usual corner table. Miguel served the agua fresca. As he retreated, he saw Sofia slide a phone across the table. Vargas looked at the screen, his expression unchanging, then gave one short nod. That night, federal agents raided a warehouse in Fort Lauderdale. 3 of Vargas's own lieutenants were arrested with 200 kilos of product. The news called it a major DEA victory. Anton, closing up, poured a scotch and muttered. He gave them up. He's cleaning house with the law's broom. Miguel understood. The raid wasn't a defeat. It was Vargas surgically removing his opposition using the police as his weapon. The tension became a living thing in the restaurant. Vargas's remaining men, the old school ones, started showing up. They'd sit at the bar, drinking mineral water, watching the corner table. Their stares at Sofia were like physical pressure. Miguel felt it in the air, the same charged silence before a tropical storm. He wanted no part of it. He had his own storm, a letter from immigration, a hearing date, the slow-motion collapse of his own carefully built invisibility. Then the night of the fork. The reservation was for 9 p.m. Vargas arrived with Sofia and 2 of the old guard, Jorge and Eladio. The seating was a silent battle. Jorge sat to Vargas's right, Sofia to his left. The orders were placed. Miguel brought the first course, a tuna tartare. He performed the ritual, present the plate, name the ingredients, step back. Vargas didn't touch it. He was listening to Jorge, who was leaning in, speaking low and fervent about respect, about tradition, about the dangers of trusting strangers. It was then Miguel saw the signal. A man in a gray blazer at the bar, a regular who always drank alone, caught Sofia's eye and gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod toward the kitchen doors. A minute later, the second course arrived. Not from the main kitchen pass, but brought directly by the sous chef, a man named Carlo. This was wrong. Carlo never served. The plate was placed before Vargas, braised short rib, and there on the forward rim was that faint, flowered dusting. Jorge was still talking. Vargas, annoyed, picked up his fork. Sofia's hand flashed out faster than thought. Her fingers clamped over Vargas, stopping the bite. "Jefe," she said, her voice a flat line, "before you eat, remember what we discussed about your sodium intake." Her eyes were not on him, but on Jorge. The table froze. Miguel, refilling water 2 tables over, saw it all. He saw the dust on the plate. He saw the panic in Carlo, the sous chef's eyes as he retreated. He saw Jorge's face flood with a telling, furious red. And he saw the man in the gray blazer at the bar, now standing, his hand moving inside his jacket. In that suspended second, the entire conspiracy was laid bare in the silent language of glances and powder. The poison wasn't from an outside enemy. It was from within. The coup was tonight, and it was happening at his station. Miguel finished polishing the glass. The manager was approaching, his eyebrows raised in question. Miguel had decided. He met the manager's eyes and said the only thing he could think of. "There is a problem with the short rib. I need to speak to chef." It was a thin wire to walk across a chasm. He had to warn someone without saying a word. And he had to do it before the man at the bar decided a waiter was a witness who needed to be erased. Chef Pierre's office was a closet of steam and fury, but when Miguel spoke, the fury died, replaced by a cold, calculating stillness. The chef, a giant from Lyon, listened without moving. The rim of the plate, powder, Carlo served it. Pierre's eyes closed for a second. When they opened, they weren't looking at Miguel, but through him at a disaster already unfolding. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice quiet. He walked out, not toward the dining room, but into the dry storage pantry. Miguel heard the beep of a speed dial call. "Anton, code black, the corner table, yes." He was not calling the police. He was calling the manager, and the term code black froze Miguel's blood. It was the restaurant's protocol for a violent incident. They were containing it, not solving it. In the dining room, the scene had transformed. Vargas had pushed his chair back. Sofia stood beside him, her body a shield. Jorge and Eladio were also standing, their chairs scraping the marble. The man in the gray blazer had moved from the bar to block the main exit. The other diners, sensing the shift in atmosphere like a drop in pressure, had fallen silent. Vargas spoke, his voice carrying in the quiet. "Jorge, you look unwell." Jorge's face was sheened with sweat. "You betray our family for this." "Accountant," he spat, pointing at Sofia. Vargas smiled. "I am preserving the family, you are the tumor." He nodded to Sofia. In one fluid motion, she lifted the suspect plate of short rib. "You are so concerned with tradition, Jorge, you should taste it first." She stepped toward him. Jorge stumbled back, colliding with his own chair. The refusal was a confession witnessed by the entire room. At that moment, Anton burst from the kitchen doors, followed by two other waiters who were not waiters. They were Vargas's security masquerading as staff. They moved toward Jorge and Eladio. The man in the gray blazer drew his weapon, not a gun, but a taser. Chaos was a breath away, but Vargas raised a single hand. Not here. He looked around at the terrified faces of Miami's elite. This is a place of business. We will discuss this privately. The command was absolute. Jorge, deflated and trapped, nodded. The entire party, Vargas, Sofia, the two old guards, and the disguised security, began moving toward the private elevator that led to the building's parking garage. The dinner was over. The purge had begun elsewhere. Miguel watched from the kitchen pass-through, hidden by a stack of menus. As Vargas passed the host's stand, he paused, leaned toward Anton, and whispered something. Anton's head turned sharply, his eyes scanning the dining room before landing like a targeting laser on the kitchen doors on Miguel. Then they were gone. The normal sounds of the restaurant did not return. A stunned silence lingered, followed by the frantic chirping of phones as diners called drivers and recounted the unbelievable scene. Pierre pulled Miguel back into the office. "You saw nothing tonight," the chef said, his finger an inch from Miguel's face. "You served water. The guests had a disagreement about wine. You understand, your immigration hearing is next month. We have written a letter of support. That letter can disappear." The threat was velvet-trap but clear. Miguel's livelihood, his chance to stay, was now currency in a silence trade. He nodded, his throat tight, but his mind was screaming. Carlo, the sous chef, was gone. His station was empty, his knives missing. No one mentioned him again. Miguel finished his shift in a daze, polishing silverware that didn't need polishing. At 2 a.m., as he exited the service alley, a black sedan glided to the curb. The passenger window slid down. It was Sofia Rivas. "Get in," she said. It was not an invitation. The interior smelled of leather and antiseptic. She drove without looking at him. "You have good eyes," she said. "Chef Pierre said you identified the contamination before service. That was fortunate." She paused. "Jorge and Eladio have resigned from the business. They are retiring to the country." Miguel knew what that meant. Carlo, however, has met with an accident, a kitchen grease fire in his home, very tragic. She finally glanced at him. "His family in Naples will be taken care of. This is how an organization corrects itself." She was telling him everything by telling him nothing. She was showing him the machine. "Why are you telling me this?" Miguel asked. "Because you are now a part of the correction," Sofia said, her voice devoid of emotion. "You saw the flaw in the system. Vargas values efficiency. A good waiter notices when the presentation is wrong. He has a job for you." The job was not in the restaurant. It was at a private members club called the Aviary, owned by one of Vargas's new shell companies. Miguel's role was the same: server, observer, silent witness. But the pay was triple, and his immigration paperwork was suddenly, mysteriously expedited. It was a gilded cage. He was being paid for his silence and recruited for his eyesight. At the Aviary, the clients were different. Not just cartel affiliates, but bankers from Zurich, politicians from Tallahassee, a retired general, a celebrity lawyer. Vargas was building his legitimate empire, and this was the drawing room. For 4 weeks, Miguel lived in a nerve-jangling paradox. He was safer than ever, with a new apartment and a legal work permit. And he was in more danger than ever, because every night he served secrets. He saw a state senator accept a cigar case that was too heavy to hold cigars. He heard a banker discuss asset migration from numbered accounts. He poured wine for the very DEA agent whose photo was in the leaked files as leading the investigation into Vargas. The agent nodded to Vargas like an old friend. The world was not what Miguel had been taught. The lines between law and crime, predator and prey, were not lines at all, but a shimmering, shifting mirage. Then the envelope arrived at his apartment. Plain paper, no stamp, slid under his door. Inside was a single photograph. It was of his mother's house in Caracas, taken from the street. His mother was in the doorway, blurred but recognizable, talking to a man. The man's face was turned away, but his posture, the cut of his jacket, was familiar. It was the man in the gray blazer from the bar. On the back of the photo, written in neat block letters, Loyalty is a full-time job. Keep watching. It was a masterpiece of terror, a reminder that his new life was a leash and his family was the collar. That night at the aviary, Miguel's hands shook as he opened a $2,000 bottle of Burgundy. Vargas noticed. He was dining alone with Sofia. As Miguel poured, Vargas spoke without looking up. "You are from Caracas, Miguel, a beautiful city, becoming so unstable. No, a man must protect what he loves." He sipped the wine. "This is excellent. You have a gentle hand. Never lose that." The threat and the compliment were woven into the same sentence. Miguel understood his role completely now. He was a canary in a coal mine made of gold, and his song was his silence. But Sofia was watching him too, with a different kind of intensity. One night after Vargas left, she stayed at the table, finishing a glass of water. She gestured for Miguel to approach. "You are a smart man," she said. "You see patterns. What is the pattern here?" She swept her hand vaguely around the opulent room. Miguel said nothing. She answered for him. "The pattern is consolidation, one hand holding all the strings, but a string can be cut from either end." She placed her glass down perfectly centered on its coaster. "My loyalty is to efficiency, to the future. Remember that." Then she left, leaving Miguel with a cryptic warning that felt like an offer or a trap. The pivot came on a rainy Thursday. A new face at the club, a man introduced as Mr. Rivera, a logistics consultant from Houston. Miguel felt a jolt of recognition. He had seen this man before, in the background of a news report about a busted cartel stash house in Texas. This was no consultant. This was a rival from the Sinaloa faction trying to muscle into Gulf roots, and Vargas was treating him like a brother, talking joint ventures. Sofia's face, across the room, was a mask of ice. This meeting was not part of her consolidation plan. This was Vargas making a deal with the devil she was supposed to eliminate. After the meeting, Miguel was clearing the private room. He found a discarded napkin tucked partly under a chair leg. On it in faint pencil was a rough sketch, a flowchart. At the top was V lines went down to boxes labeled shipping, banking, politics. One line, however, went from V to a box labeled legacy with a question mark. From the legacy box, a line was drawn sharply to a box at the bottom, circled heavily. In that box was a single word, Rivas. And from that circle, a line led off the napkin, ending in an arrow pointing to a hastily drawn symbol, a badge. The air left Miguel's lungs. The diagram was a hypothesis of betrayal. Sofia Rivas was not just an efficiency expert. The legacy box had to be Jorge's old faction, the traditionalists. Was she working with the remnants, or was the badge literal? Was she law enforcement? The drawing suggested Vargas was suspicious, tracing a potential leak back to her. But the author was unknown. Was it Vargas testing his loyalties? Was it Sofia testing his perception? Or was it the rival, Mr. Rivera, planting a seed of discord? Miguel pocketed the napkin, his heart hammering. That night the black sedan was at the curb again. But this time it was not Sofia. The man in the gray blazer opened the rear door. Mr. Vargas would like a word at the house. This was it. The invitation to the inner sanctum, or the prelude to a disappearance. The gilded cage door was swinging open, and Miguel had to walk through, not knowing if he was being led to a reward or an execution. As the car merged onto the freeway, heading not to the city but toward the isolated mansions of Coral Gables, Miguel knew the rules had changed forever. He was no longer just a witness. He had become a piece on the board, and both sides were making their move. Vargas's house was not a home. It was a fortress disguised as a museum, all cold marble and priceless art that no one lived with, only owned. The man in the gray blazer, whose name was Silva, led Miguel through a silent, cavernous living room to a library. Vargas stood at a window, his back to the door, looking out at the rain-slicked patio. He didn't turn. "Sit, Miguel." The order was quiet. Miguel sat in a leather chair that felt like it was swallowing him. Vargas finally turned. He held the crumpled napkin between two fingers. "You found this." It wasn't a question. Miguel's blood turned to ice. He managed a nod. "And you took it. Why?" Vargas's eyes were black pools, giving nothing away. It had seemed important," Miguel stammered. "It seemed like a mistake." A mistake, Vargas repeated, almost amused. He walked to his desk, placed the napkin down, and smoothed it with his palm. This is not a mistake, this is a test, and you passed. He looked at Miguel. I had it drawn. I had Carlo's replacement place it. I needed to see who would find it, who would bring it to me. Sofia did not. You did. Miguel's mind reeled. The entire incident, the diagram, was a manufactured loyalty test. Vargas's paranoia was a precision instrument. You suspect Sofia, Miguel said, the words out before he could stop them. Vargas's smile was thin. I suspect everyone, but her, yes. The pattern is wrong. She eliminates problems too cleanly. She has no appetite, only efficiency. That is useful until it is turned on you. He leaned forward. I believe she is not who she says she is. The badge on this napkin is my fear given form. I think she may be working for someone else. Perhaps my new friend Rivera. Perhaps the government. Perhaps for herself. I need to know. He laid out the new reality. Miguel would remain at the aviary. He would continue to be the observant waiter. But now he would have a second job, to watch Sofia, to report her movements, her conversations, her contacts, directly and only to Vargas. In return, his mother in Caracas would receive a monthly pension that would triple her income. His immigration status would be made permanent. He would be, in Vargas's words, a valued member of the family. The alternative was implied in the silent presence of Silva by the door. Miguel was now a spy in a war he didn't understand, hired by one side to betray the other with his family's welfare as the salary. He accepted. There was no choice to make. That night, lying in his new, quiet apartment paid for by Vargas, he felt a profound dislocation. He was no longer Miguel Santos, business student and waiter. He was an asset, a weapon pointed at the woman who had saved Vargas's life. The following week was a masterclass in duplicity. Miguel served Sofia her usual sparkling water, his hand steady, his smile practiced. He noted the times she used her phone, the way she always sat facing the entrance, her meetings with the banker from Zurich that ran too long. He filed sterile reports to Silva, met with banker H duration 45 minutes, discussed market volatility. It felt like a pointless, paranoid game, until the night of the charity gala. The aviary was closed for a private event for the Florida Coastal Conservation Society. Vargas was the honorary chairman, smiling for cameras with politicians. Sofia moved through the crowd like a shadow. Miguel, in a tuxedo, circulated with champagne. He saw Sofia step onto a secluded balcony with the DEA agent, the one from the files. His pulse spiked. This was it. Proof. He edged closer, pretending to tidy a service cart, his ears straining. Heard fragments over the string quartet. Can't keep routing through Freeport, the audit trail, the agent said. Sofia's reply was clipped. It's handled, the logistics are clean, your confirmation is the priority. Then the agent's lower tone, is he still suspicious, Sofia? He's always suspicious. The waiter is his new pet, it's manageable. A chill shot down Miguel's spine. They were talking about him, the agent sighed. Just keep the channel open. We need the Rivera meet confirmed. That's the package. They parted. Miguel stood frozen, the champagne flute in his hand dripping condensation onto his fingers. The report he gave to Silva was heavily edited. He mentioned the meeting, but not the content about himself or the package. For the first time, he was holding something back, a tiny act of rebellion. He now had two terrifying truths. Sofia was indeed working with the DEA, and they were using Vargas to get to the rival, Rivera. Vargas was both the hunter and the bait in a federal sting. Miguel was trapped between a cartel leader and a federal operation, lying to both. Sofia cornered him 2 nights later in the club's wine cellar. You've been busy, she said, her voice echoing off the stone walls. Filing little reports. Tell me, what did you tell Silva about my talk with the gentleman from the Conservation Society? Miguel's mouth went dry. I said you discussed marine pollution. A faint smile touched her lips. Good, a plausible nothing, you're learning. She stepped closer. You understand the position you're in. Vargas thinks you work for him. I know you are a scared man trying to protect his mother. The truth is, you work for the situation, and the situation is changing. She confirmed it without confirming it. She was federal, or at least an informant so deep she might as well be. Her mission was to dismantle the entire network, Vargas's and Rivera's, in one fell swoop. The package was Rivera himself coming to a summit brokered by Vargas. The DEA would take them all. Your role, she said, is to keep Vargas feeling secure, validated, to be his trusted eyes so my real work can proceed. Do you understand? This is how you truly protect your family. Not with his blood money, but by ending this. She was offering him a side, a purpose, a chance to be more than a pawn, but it was just another form of manipulation. Now he had three masters: Vargas, the DEA through Sofia, and his own desperate conscience. The pressure was a physical weight on his chest. The summit was set. Rivera would come to the aviary in 72 hours for a final agreement on territory. Vargas was triumphant, believing he was outmaneuvering his rival. Sofia was calm, a surgeon preparing for operation. Miguel was the unstable element, the variable nobody could fully control. He spent his days in a haze of anxiety, polishing glasses until they squeaked, jumping at every sound. The night before the summit, the third revelation hit, the one that changed everything. Vargas called Miguel to the house again. This time he was agitated, packing. "My people in Caracas," he said. "They tell me a story about your father." Miguel felt the floor tilt. His father had died when he was 10, a mechanic killed in a random street robbery. They say he was not a mechanic, they say he was a bookkeeper for the Ramirez family. The Ramirez family was a small-time cartel wiped out by the Norte Val cartel, Vargas's cartel, 15 years ago. They say he was skimming, and he was executed for it, by my predecessor. The room swam. Vargas watched him, analyzing the shock. You did not know. It was a statement. Miguel could only shake his head, a torrent of childhood memories twisting into new, horrific shapes. His father's secrecy, the late nights, the sudden funeral. I believe, Vargas continued softly, that this is not a coincidence, that Sofia or her handlers found you. A man with a buried grievance against my organization. A perfect, plausible pawn to place near me. Your keen eyes. Your convenient morality, all part of the casting. The conspiracy deepened, grew more personal. Miguel wasn't just a random waiter. He was a chosen weapon, his past a latent landmine someone had dug up and armed. Was it true? He had no way of knowing, but the doubt was poison. Every memory of his father was now suspect. Every interaction with Sofia felt like part of a script he hadn't read. Vargas placed a hand on his shoulder, a grotesque parody of comfort. This is what they do. They use your pain against you. They turned you into a Trojan horse before you even knew there was a war, but you are with me now. We have uncovered their plot together. Tomorrow, when Rivera comes, we will not be the victims of their sting. We will be the authors of our own. Vargas's plan was a breathtaking double-cross. He would go through with the Rivera meeting, but he had no intention of making a deal. He would record Rivera admitting to his Sinaloa ties, then have Silva and his men ambush the meeting, killing Rivera and his guards. He would claim self-defense against a rival incursion, presenting the recording to his allies as proof. And Sofia, she would be discovered as the leak, the traitor. Her fate would be a lesson. Miguel's role was critical. He was to ensure Sofia drank a specific glass of wine, a wine he would serve, that contained a fast-acting incapacitant. Not poison, Vargas assured him, just something to make her sleep through the violence. A kindness, he called it. Miguel left the house numb. His father's death, his own recruitment, the entire structure of his life for the past year was possibly a fabrication by unseen forces. And now he was being ordered to drug a federal agent, to become an accomplice to multiple murders. Refusal meant his mother died. Compliance meant his soul died. There was no third option. He drove to a payphone, the napkin with the badge symbol burning in his pocket. He had one play left, one desperate attempt to find a fourth path. He dialed the number for the DEA's Miami field office, the public line listed online. When a voice answered, he spoke quickly, using words he'd heard Sofia say. Package delivery is compromised. The bird knows about the Trojan horse. Tomorrow's meeting is a trap. The waiter is the trigger. He hung up, his heart pounding against his ribs. He had no idea if the message would get through or if it would even be believed. He had just betrayed Vargas and possibly Sofia without knowing who would catch him first. He returned to his apartment. On the doorstep was a small, elegant food delivery bag from a gourmet shop he didn't order from. Inside was a single container of flan, his mother's favorite dessert. There was no note. The message was clear. They were still watching, every move, every choice. The walls of his gilded cage were now closing in, and tomorrow, at the summit where the future of a criminal empire would be decided, Miguel Santos would have to serve the final course, not knowing if it would be a salvation or a slaughter. The aviary had never been so silent or so full of weapons. Every crystal glass, every polished fork felt like a potential instrument of violence. Miguel dressed with mechanical precision, his hands moving on their own. The special bottle of Burgundy, the one Vargas had given him, waited in a chiller. The liquid inside looked innocent, a deep ruby red. The incapacitant was odorless, tasteless, a kindness. Rivera arrived at 8 p.m. sharp with 4 men who moved like dancers, their suits cut to conceal more than fashion. Vargas greeted him with open arms, the picture of a gracious host. Sofia stood slightly apart, a statue in a black dress. Her eyes met Miguel's for a fraction of a second. There was no signal, no secret nod, just a blankness that was more terrifying than any threat. The dinner proceeded through the courses. Oysters, consommé, a salad. Miguel performed his ballet, pouring wine for everyone but Sofia, who, as always, drank water. Vargas was expansive, talking shipping lanes, port fees, market share. Rivera was cautious, measuring every word. The tension was a high-pitched hum only Miguel seemed to hear. He watched the clock. His payphone warning was out there, somewhere in the void. Had it been received? Had it been believed? Or was he alone? The main course was served. As Miguel set the plates, Vargas gave the signal, a subtle tap of his finger against his wine glass. It was time. Miguel's mouth went dry. He walked to the service station, his legs numb. He picked up the special bottle and the single, destined glass. His hands did not shake. He had entered a state beyond fear, a cold, clear space where every action was inevitable. He approached the table. Vargas was laughing at a joke. Rivera was smiling thinly. Sofia was watching her water glass. Miguel stood beside her. "A glass of the Chambal Musigny, Ms. Rivas?" he asked, his voice steady. She looked up at him. Her gaze was a probe. Did she know? Did she see the conflict in his eyes? After a lifetime's pause, she gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "Thank you, Miguel." He poured, the wine flowed, a crimson stream. He placed the glass before her. She did not reach for it. Vargas was watching, his jovial mask still on, but his eyes were fixed on Sofia's hand. The entire table seemed to hold its breath. This was the trigger. If she drank, Vargas's trap would spring. Silva and his men were positioned in the kitchen, behind the curtains, waiting for her to slump. Sofia lifted the glass. She swirled it, brought it to her nose, inhaled. Then she did something unexpected. She turned to Vargas. "A beautiful vintage, but you know, Raphael, I've never liked Burgundy, too sentimental." And she placed the glass full directly in front of Vargas's plate. "To our partnership," she said, her voice like steel. "You should have the first taste." The room froze. It was a checkmate move, a public, devastating refusal that exposed the plot. Vargas's smile vanished. Rivera looked between them, confusion turning to alarm. Vargas's eyes flicked to Miguel, filled with a fury that promised death. The game was up. Vargas stood abruptly, his chair screeching on the marble. "Enough!" He nodded to Silva, who stepped from the kitchen doorway, a pistol drawn. But as Silva moved, the other doors burst open. Not with Vargas's men, with federal agents in tactical vests, weapons raised. And leading them was the DEA agent from the gala. "Nobody move, DEA." Chaos erupted. Rivera's men drew weapons. Shots rang out, deafening in the enclosed space. Glass shattered. Miguel dropped to the floor behind the service cart. He saw Vargas make a grab for Sofia, but she was already moving, a pistol in her hand from somewhere beneath the table. She didn't shoot Vargas. She fired twice at Silva, who fell. It was precise, clinical. She was not a passive informant, she was an operative. The firefight was short and brutal. Rivera was shot in the leg, screaming. His men were subdued. Vargas, disarmed, was forced to his knees by two agents, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred directed at Sofia. The agent in charge walked to her. "You okay?" Sofia nodded, holstering her weapon. "Packages delivered, both of them." She then turned and looked directly at Miguel, still crouched behind the cart. "Him too, he's part of it." Miguel's heart stopped. This was the betrayal he hadn't seen coming. He was not a rescued pawn. He was collateral, a loose end to be swept up. As agents pulled him to his feet, he locked eyes with Sofia. There was no apology there, no recognition of their whispered alliance in the wine cellar. There was only the mission, now complete. The next 48 hours were a blur of interrogation rooms and fluorescent lights. Miguel told them everything, from the powdered plate to the napkin diagram to Vargas's confession about his father. The agents were skeptical, relentless. They had Sofia's testimony, and hers was the official narrative. In it, Miguel was Vargas's trusted servant, recruited to poison a federal agent. His payphone call was portrayed as a panicked attempt to save himself when he realized the sting was closing in, not an act of conscience. But then evidence emerged. The security hard drive from Oceano Azul, obtained by a subpoena, showed the night of the fork in clear detail. It showed Carlos serving the plate. It showed the powder. It showed Miguel's delayed reaction, then his urgent conversation with Chef Pierre. It corroborated his starting point. Furthermore, forensic accounting traced the pension payments to his mother back to a Vargas shell company. He was being framed by Vargas, yes, but the frame was real. He was both victim and accomplice. The deal was offered, the only one he would get: testify against Vargas and Rivera. In exchange, witness protection. A new name, a new life somewhere cold and anonymous. No return to Caracas. No contact with his mother. It was not freedom. It was another kind of cage, but one with a survival lock. The trial was a media spectacle. Vargas and Rivera, charged with racketeering, conspiracy, and attempted murder of a federal officer. Miguel was the surprise witness, his identity shielded, his testimony delivered from behind a screen. He spoke of the fork, the powder, the napkin, the orders. Vargas never looked at him. Sofia, now revealed as Special Agent Sofia Rivas of the Drug Enforcement Administration, testified with cool, surgical detail. The recorded conversations from the aviary, the financial trails, the weapons, all painted an inescapable picture. Both men were convicted on all counts. Vargas received 3 consecutive life sentences. Rivera received 50 years. The headlines celebrated the fall of 2 kingpins. The role of a waiter was a footnote, an intriguing human interest detail quickly forgotten. The day before his relocation, Miguel was visited in a safe house by Agent Rivas. She was out of uniform, looking almost ordinary. "You think I betrayed you," she said, not asking. He said nothing. "My job was to bring down Vargas and dismantle his network. Your father's story was a fabrication Vargas created to manipulate you. We verified it. Your father was a mechanic. He died in a robbery. I'm sorry it was used against you." Miguel absorbed this. The last thread of his old life snipped. "And using me, leading me on," Sofia sighed, a rare crack in her armor. "You were a variable, an unpredictable one. I needed Vargas to trust you so he would reveal his plans to you. I also needed you scared enough to potentially come to us. The payphone call proved you could make a choice. It saved your life. The U.S. attorney wanted to charge you as a co-conspirator. I argued that call showed mitigating intent." She paused. "This isn't a clean business. We use the tools we have. You were a tool, now you're a witness. It's a better deal than most get." She stood to leave. At the door, she turned. "The man in the gray blazer, Silva, he's the one who took the photo of your mother. He was on Vargas's payroll, but he was also on Rivera's. A double agent playing both sides. He's the one who drew the napkin diagram trying to sow chaos. He died in that room. The story dies with him." She offered a final, unreadable look. "Good luck, Miguel, don't look back." He was relocated to a small town in the Pacific Northwest, given the name Daniel. He works in a library, not a restaurant. The silence is profound, broken only by the rustle of pages and the patter of rain on the roof. Some nights, he dreams of crystal clinking and the smell of fine wine. He wonders about his mother, if the pension stopped, if she thinks he is dead. He lives with the permanent echo of choices made in terror. A year later, a plain envelope arrives at the library, addressed to his new name. Inside is a faded photograph of his father, the mechanic, smiling beside a vintage car. On the back, in neat block letters, it says, "He was proud of you, be safe." There is no return address. It could be from the Witness Protection Program, a kindness. It could be from Sophia Rivas, a token of a debt she won't acknowledge. Or it could be from someone else, a reminder that no cage is ever completely sealed. He files the photo in a book of poetry, a place he will rarely look. He goes to the window. The rain has stopped and a weak sun is breaking through the clouds. He thinks of a hand shooting out, stopping a fork. He thinks of powder on a plate and a single, terrifying moment of clarity that shattered one world and built this one. He did not choose to be a hero. He was chosen to be a witness, and in the end, that was the only truth that mattered. He turns from the window and goes back to shelving books, a man who once saw a crime in a glance and whose whole life became the evidence. So what really happened that night at Oceano Azul? On one level, it's a simple story. A man saw something out of place and spoke up. But that's the seed, not the tree. The tree is everything that grew from that single moment of attention, a hidden war, a personal history weaponized, a moral compass shattered and slowly reassembled in the stark light of survival. We tell ourselves that truth is a solid thing, a fact you can point to. The powder on the plate, the badge on the napkin. But this story shows us that truth is more often a current, pulling you into deeper, darker waters where the facts themselves are manufactured, where your own pain can be used as bait, and where the people saving you might also be sacrificing you. Miguel Santos entered a world where every truth had a mirror and every ally had a second motive. His victory wasn't in solving the puzzle, but in surviving the maze with a shred of himself intact. This is the architecture of modern power. It doesn't operate in shadows anymore. It operates in plain sight, in expensive restaurants and charity galas, using lawyers and banks and legitimate fronts. The violence is not the point. It's a tool for business. And in that world, the most dangerous person is not the one with the gun, but the one who sees the pattern everyone else is trained to ignore. The waiter, the maid, the unnoticed witness whose very invisibility becomes their power and their curse. Miguel's story ends in a quiet library, but the questions it raises echo loudly. How many other invisible witnesses are out there, holding fragments of a larger conspiracy they don't understand? How many ordinary people are right now being used as pawns in games they never agreed to play, their loyalties tested, their lives leveraged against them? And when the moment comes to speak, to act, to choose a side in a war you didn't start, what would you do? We live in a world of presented narratives. The media story, the official report, the social media feed. But beneath that glossy surface, there is always another layer, a reality built on glances, silence, conversations, and the quiet courage of those who dare to look closer. Miguel looked closer. He saw the powder, and with that one act of seeing, he was pulled into the current. He didn't stop the cartel. He didn't become a hero. He became a witness, and then evidence, and then a ghost. But in doing so, he proved that the most fragile thing in any system of control is not its security, but its secrecy. And secrecy depends on everyone choosing not to see. The next time you walk into a room, a restaurant, an office, look at the details. Notice who is watching who. Listen to what isn't being said, because the truth isn't always a shouted confession. Sometimes it's a faint dusting on the rim of a plate, waiting for someone with the courage or the desperation to call it by its name. If you found yourself in that story, which role would you play? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more documentaries that pull back the curtain on the hidden worlds around us, make sure to subscribe. The world is full of stories waiting for a witness. Thanks for watching.